It started with a pop, a small, almost pathetic crack, swallowed by the night. That tiny sound wasn't just a wound. It was the opening shot in a war to reclaim my name and expose a monstrous lie. The sound wasn't like in the movies. There was no deafening bang that ripped through the quiet suburban evening. It was a pop, a sharp, almost pathetic little crack that was immediately swallowed by the hum of the cicadas. For a second, I didn't even understand what had happened. I just knew there was a sudden, searing heat in my left thigh, a fire that bloomed with impossible speed, and my leg simply stopped working. It had all started so normally. I was driving home from parent-teacher conferences, my tote bag full of student artwork on the passenger seat. I was humming along to a podcast, thinking about the microwave dinner waiting for me at home, when the world dissolved into flashing red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. My stomach instantly clenched into a tight, cold knot. It's a feeling I think a lot of people know, but for me, it was laced with something more. My dad's voice echoed in my head, the memory of a dozen different conversations, all versions of the talk. Keep your hands on the wheel. Announce every move you make. Be polite. Be compliant. Your job isn't to be right, Imani. Your job is to get home alive. I pulled over, killed the engine, and rolled down all 4 windows before the officer even got out of his car. I placed my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, my palms sweating. He was a young white guy, couldn't have been more than 25, with a jaw so tight it looked like he was chewing on rocks. His flashlight beam darted around my car, over the drawings in the passenger seat, into the empty back, before finally settling on my face. "License and registration," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. "Of course, officer," I said, my own voice a little too high, a little too shaky. "My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for it now, very slowly." I moved my right hand off the wheel with the deliberate pace of someone handling a bomb. "Just keep your hands where I can see them," he snapped, his hand drifting down to rest on the butt of his holstered gun. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, officer. They're right here." I opened the glove box. The little light flickered on, illuminating a messy pile of napkins, old insurance cards, and a tire pressure gauge. My registration was in a plastic sleeve, tucked right at the back. I had to fish around for it for a moment. "What are you doing? What are you reaching for?" His voice was sharp now, filled with an alarm that made no sense. "My registration, sir," I said, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "It's just stuck behind some papers." I finally got a finger on the plastic sleeve and started to pull it out. It was in that moment, as my hand was coming back into view, holding nothing but a flimsy piece of paper, that his composure shattered. His eyes widened. He shouted something, I don't even know what it was. It wasn't a command, just a noise of pure panic. And then came the pop. The world tilted. My leg buckled, and I slumped against the driver's side door, the searing pain finally registering in my brain. I looked down and saw the dark circle blooming on my jeans, the sticky warmth spreading across the fabric. I looked back up at the officer. The fear on his face had been replaced by a look of utter, dumbfounded shock, as if the gun had gone off all by itself. "Shots fired," he screamed into his radio, his voice cracking. "Suspect is down. She went for a weapon." My mind reeled. Weapon? I was holding my car's registration. It was still clutched in my hand. More sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Another patrol car screeched to a halt behind the first. As they pulled me out of the car and laid me on the asphalt, the world spinning around me, I heard the first officer talking to the second. His voice was low, frantic, a desperate whisper I was never supposed to hear. "We have to get our story straight," he hissed. She was non-compliant. I saw something shiny in her hand. I feared for my life. The second officer just nodded grimly. As the paramedics worked on my leg, I saw the second officer walk back to my car. He leaned inside, his back to me. When he pulled away a few seconds later, I couldn't see what he was doing, but a cold dread, deeper and more terrifying than the pain in my leg, washed over me. They were building a lie on top of my blood. I was alone, bleeding on the pavement, and my life was being rewritten by the very people who were supposed to protect it. I was about to pass out from the pain when one of the paramedics tending to me paused, his eyes wide. He wasn't looking at my leg anymore. He was staring at something near my passenger seat, something that definitely hadn't been there when I was pulled over. He looked at the police officer, then back at me, and in his eyes I saw not just pity, but pure, unadulterated fear. I woke up in a room that smelled like antiseptic and despair. A dull, throbbing ache had replaced the initial fire in my leg, which was now encased in a cast and elevated on a pillow. But the physical pain was a distant echo compared to the cold terror coiling in my gut. There was a police officer stationed outside my hospital room door. I wasn't a victim here. I was a suspect. My brother David was my first visitor. His face was a thundercloud of rage and worry. He held my hand, his knuckles white. "They're running the story on the news," he said, his voice a low growl. "Officer Miller. They're calling him a hero. Says you were erratic, refused to show your hands, and then lunged for a weapon." My laugh was a dry, broken sound. "I lunged for my registration, David. The one I told him I was getting. They found a gun, Imani." He squeezed my hand, his eyes pleading with me to make it make sense. "In your car, on the passenger side floor. A little silver handgun." The paramedic's terrified face flashed in my mind. The second officer leaning into my car. It wasn't a bad dream. It was real. They had planted a gun in my car. A car filled with my second graders' drawings of their families and pets. The absurdity of it was so profound it felt like a punch to the chest, knocking all the air out of my lungs. I was a teacher. I had a master's degree in early childhood education. I organized the school's canned food drive every year. The last time I'd even seen a real gun was in a museum. "There was no gun," I whispered, the words feeling useless against the mountain of lies they were building. "David, they planted it. I saw them." That's when Ms. Davies came into the picture. A public defender with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. She looked like she ran on black coffee and righteous fury. She listened to my story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I was done, she took a deep breath. "Okay, Imani," she said, her tone all business. "Here's where we are. It's your word against two officers of the law. Officer Miller, the shooter, is a 4-year veteran with a clean record. Officer Schmidt, the backup, is corroborating his story completely. The gun they found is a ghost gun. No serial number. Untraceable. They're painting you as a criminal to justify the shooting." "But the body cams," I said, a desperate hope fluttering in my chest. His body cam must have seen me holding the registration. It must have seen everything. Ms. Davies's face tightened. "We filed an immediate motion for the footage. The department is stonewalling, which is expected. They'll edit it, they'll lose it. They'll do whatever they can to control the narrative." The next few days were a blur of pain, medication, and legal dread. The news cycle moved on, but my new reality was just setting in. I was facing charges: assaulting a police officer, illegal possession of a firearm. My teaching license was suspended pending the investigation. My life was crumbling, and the people who destroyed it were being celebrated. The official police report was released, a work of pure fiction that detailed my aggressive movements and furtive gestures. It was designed to be airtight. Then the hammer fell. Miss Davies came to my room, and for the first time I saw a flicker of defeat in her eyes. "They released a statement about the body camera footage," she said, her voice flat. "Officer Miller's camera suffered a data transfer error at the moment of the incident. The crucial 30 seconds are gone. Corrupted. Officer Schmidt claims he only activated his camera after you were already on the ground." I stared at her, the room starting to spin. "So that's it. They can just say the evidence disappeared, and that's it. They have the gun. They have 2 officers sticking to the same story. Without that footage—" She trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words. "We have nothing." My hope, which had been flickering like a dying candle, was finally extinguished. They were going to get away with it. They shot me, and now they were going to put me in prison for it. Ms. Davies was gathering her briefcase, her jaw set grimly. "The DA is going to formally file the charges tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, Imani. We're going to fight. But I need you to be prepared for—" Her phone buzzed, interrupting the death sentence she was delivering. She glanced at it, annoyed. Then her eyes widened. She stood frozen for a moment, reading the message on her screen. Her head snapped up, and she looked at me, her sharp eyes suddenly blazing with an intensity that sent a jolt through my entire body. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She held up her phone, turning the screen so I could see the anonymous text. It was just 2 sentences. "The cops are lying. Check the doorbell camera at 742 Elm Street. 742 Elm Street." The address was burned into my brain. It was 2 houses down from where I'd been shot, a quaint little colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn. We knew instantly what it meant. A Ring camera, or something similar, perched on a front door, and silent, impartial witness to the whole nightmare. Ms. Davies became a whirlwind of motion, firing off emails and making calls with a renewed, ferocious energy. The homeowners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons, were initially hesitant, intimidated by a visit from the police, who had advised them that their camera hadn't captured anything relevant. But Ms. Davies, armed with a hastily procured subpoena and an iron will, convinced them to hand over the footage. We watched it for the first time in Ms. Davies's cramped office, my brother David standing behind me, his hands on my shoulders. The video was grainy, shot from an angle across the street, but it was horrifyingly clear. It showed my car pulling over. It showed Officer Miller approaching my window. And then it showed the moment. There was no lunge. There was no aggressive movement. There was just me, slowly pulling a piece of paper from my glove compartment. The pop of the gun was tinny, indistinct, but the aftermath was undeniable. The video didn't stop there. Crucially, it kept rolling. It showed Officer Schmidt arriving and his hushed, frantic conversation with Miller. And then, the moment that made the air in the room turn to ice. It clearly showed Schmidt retrieving a small, dark object from the trunk of his own patrol car, walking over to my vehicle and tossing it inside onto the passenger side floor. It was all there. The lie, the cover-up, the conspiracy, captured in grainy, indisputable detail. My breath hitched in my throat, and for the first time since I woke up in that hospital bed, I felt something other than fear. It was a hot, surging wave of vindication. David let out a strangled cry behind me, a sound of both fury and relief. Miss Davies didn't celebrate. She just picked up her phone and made a call. "I'm sending you a file," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "I suggest you look at it before the district attorney holds his press conference tomorrow morning." I didn't know who she was talking to, but I knew their day was about to be ruined. The next call she made was to a different kind of number. She didn't give them her name, just the facts. The video, the cover-up, the planted gun. "You'll be interested in this," she said. "It involves the shooting of an unarmed schoolteacher by the name of Imani Washington." She was speaking to the FBI. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The local news, which had been lauding Officer Miller as a hero, suddenly had a new lead story. The doorbell camera footage was leaked anonymously, of course, and went viral within hours. My face was no longer that of a suspected criminal, but of a victim. The FBI swooped in, taking over the investigation from the local police department, who were now facing an internal affairs nightmare of their own. Officers Miller and Schmidt were suspended, then arrested. Their desperate, whispered conversation on the side of the road was now a federal exhibit. Faced with the irrefutable video evidence, Schmidt crumbled. He confessed everything, detailing how a panicked Miller had begged him for help, how they had concocted the story of the shiny weapon, and how he had used a ghost gun from a previous bust, one they were supposed to have logged into evidence to plant in my car. His confession painted a picture not of 2 brave cops, but of 2 terrified men willing to destroy an innocent life to save their own careers. All the charges against me were dropped, of course. The district attorney who had been so eager to prosecute me held a press conference, his face grim, apologizing for the grievous errors in the investigation. I received a formal, written apology from the chief of police and the city. It felt hollow, but it was a start. My recovery was long. My leg will never be the same, and the phantom echo of that pop still haunts my quiet moments. But something inside me had changed too. I had seen the machine up close, how easily and how quickly it could grind you up and spit you out. But I also saw that it wasn't invincible. It could be broken by the truth. The FBI agent who took my final statement, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, told me something that stuck with me. That paramedic who saw the gun, she said, he's the one who sent the anonymous text to your lawyer. He was terrified, but he knew what he saw was wrong. It was a small act of courage from a stranger, a single crack of light in a wall of darkness. He, along with the Hendersons and their doorbell camera, had saved me. They reminded me that for every person willing to build a lie, there are others brave enough to tell the truth. It's a lesson I'll carry with me forever, and one I plan to teach my students when I finally walk back into my classroom.